Hey, Miquela, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Miquela, give us a little introduction. Tell us about yourself and what you do for AgriLife Extension.
Okay, my name is Miquela Smith. I'm an extension program specialist for health within the Disaster Assessment and Recovery Unit. I've been with AgriLife Extension Service since 2016, and really my work has kind of focused on disaster preparedness, response, and recovery, but also mental health, generally speaking, as well as how we're affected by disasters. And so I've helped build out some of our program offerings as an agency. We have programs that are, building resiliency, stress management skills. So focusing on mindfulness and stress management in general. But then also, how can we prepare for disasters? How can we give people skills to be able to prepare to the mental health effects that we're going to see after someone experiences a disaster? So another big part of my work in the past couple of years has been expanding our mental health first aid program, both with grant funding and then also with partnerships with local mental health authorities to make sure that before this happens, we have members in the community who have first aid level skills to be able to respond to someone appropriately after a crisis situation. And that is also a valuable part of long-term recovery. So months down the line, we notice that people are still struggling. So do we have community members, lay people who aren't necessarily clinicians, but who have skills to say, hey, something's going on? And so those have been my focus areas for the past couple of years.
Okay. Well, I think hugely important because, when we think about the aftermath of the fires, I think we're all thinking about, the donation points where people are bringing hay and people are bringing fencing supplies and we're donating money and helping the fire department, all of which, right, hugely important in an ongoing in their aftermath of a crisis. But like you say, there's a mental health component here that could certainly and will certainly be an issue, now and down the road. So I appreciate the work that you do on that. Folks who've been around for a while know that mental health is something that's really important to me. And so I think really important work. So let's talk about, and one thing I think important here too, like this is something that you understand firsthand. You've got family who lives in Lipscomb County and dealt with fires in 2017 and then again this time as well.
Yeah, when I saw news that there was a fire up in the Panhandle, I immediately was kind of transported back to 2017 when my husband and I lived up at his family's ranch. They have some cattle and quarter horses, and we lived out in the middle of nowhere in Lipscomb County for 5 years, and it's a very special place to me. And while we were out there, there were some very horrifying fires, and luckily my family's ranch was not affected, but at that time, I was a family and community health agent for AgriLife Extension in Lipscomb County. So, although we weren't directly affected by the wildfires, we evacuated, we had to move cattle, and it was really scary leading up to the event. And then afterward, I was part of that response effort to try and get people resources that they needed. And I love that you brought up kind of this is something that we've seen before and we're seeing again, because the difference, one thing that I've noticed is that in 2017, I was this family community health agent, and I saw we were doing a great job of setting up animal supply points, bringing in hay, providing food for the first responders. But we had really very few resources at that time to even like begin talking about these short and long-term mental health effects of the disaster. I remember feeling so helpless.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, since 2017, I've noticed a shift and a change. And so I do feel there is more work to be done. But I do feel like in seeing the response to this, there is awareness. There are people talking about, hey, we need to pay attention not just to the animals, but these folks who lost their homes, who lost animals, who had to put animals down because they were so badly injured, that is a severe form of trauma. And there are going to be long-term effects that we need to be able to, I mean, maybe not in a clinical way, but respond to and try and be part of those recovery efforts too. So it's been hard seeing this happen again. And but also it's been very it's given me hope to see that we have shifted in our minds and that there has been a different response this time.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think you deserve a lot of the credit. You're not taking it. You deserve a lot of the credit for that way that we are prepared now that we weren't then. So kudos to you. So let's talk, Miquela, when we're talking about a disaster, you've sort of phrased this as short-term and long-term. What do we expect to see in the aftermath of something like this in the short term? Kind of I don't like the word normal, right? I'm not going to ask you what's normal, but like what is expected that we would see and think, yeah, this is expected behavior from people.
Sure. Actually, in kind of like the trauma area, we would call these normal reactions to abnormal events. And so, like, pretty much anything that is maybe some out of a person's regular character, is any kind of change is like, okay, this is normal because we don't know how people respond. People all respond differently. So, on the one hand, we may see people who are very angry, very upset. And then on the other hand, we may see people who are maybe turning inward and feeling hopeless and sad. And so there is no one single response. We all respond differently to trauma. And honestly, what is traumatic to one person may not be traumatic to another person.
Mhm.
And so it's normal to feel this wide range: hopelessness, guilt, anger, sadness, confusion, numbness. These are all things that we would expect to see because of what the harm that's been done to the person in this acute period. And then, of course, when concern arises, is okay, these symptoms are persisting, they're going on for extended amounts of time, and a person is not kind of bouncing back, so to speak. So that's when we kind of see, or there's this delineation, and it's up to, I mean, there's no like exact timeline, but I would say weeks. When it turns into 3 weeks, 4 weeks and beyond, that's when it's like, okay, maybe a person could benefit from some type of professional help.
Okay. And I think important too to flag, like in the short term, like we said, even though that these types of feelings, very common, very normal, if we will, if those feelings are beyond what seems common or normal, right? If you've got feelings of like despair, if anybody has suicidal thoughts, anything like that, totally different, even in the short term, definitely need to be looking at seeking help in that scenario.
Absolutely. So that's a great point because a traumatic event could be very quickly become a crisis situation. So it's one of those things where, depending on a person's individual kind of personality and also their situation, it could turn into a crisis, something like a suicide crisis, very quickly. And so it's helpful to have people around who know what warning signs to look for. One of the things that I've learned in teaching mental health first aid, I'm a mental health first aid instructor. One of the things that I've learned in teaching this class repeatedly is that people are well intended and they want to help, but oftentimes they do not know what to say. They don't know what to look for, and they're so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they say nothing at all. And recently, I've heard well-intended people say things about those that they know who were affected by the fires. Like they've said things like, I know that they were affected by the fires and they're really busy with the cleanup. So I don't want to bother them. And so I'm going to leave them alone. When in reality, and they think they're being helpful, but in reality, we need to be checking in with people. And of course, if someone tells you, leave me alone, we want to be respectful of that. But when something like this happens, we need to check in on people and make sure that they're okay. And, understanding, looking for signs and symptoms of a worsening mental health condition. So that's something where clinical help would be might be beneficial, or noticing that something worsening warning signs of suicide risk. Those are things that we can teach people how to do, but it's important that people embrace kind of this educational component because suicide is preventable. We can intervene early when someone is experiencing distress so that it doesn't progress to a more serious issue. But it takes education to make sure that people have those tools and those skills to recognize those things.
Yeah. Well, and this is something you and I talk about a lot. I think that one of the real strength of rural communities, like communities in the Panhandle, right, is the like small, close-knit nature of the community. I think that really sets us up well to be able to see some of the warning signs, right? To be able to step in, to have those types of connections. So I really do think that that's a benefit of kind of the area that we live in, the communities that we're in. So talk to me about if somebody does want to learn more about this, if somebody's like, okay, I do think this is something I'm interested in. This is a training I might want to take to where maybe I do know more about what to look for or how to talk to someone. What do we have available through Extension?
Yeah. So again, mental health first aid is really kind of the gold standard program. It's a very comprehensive program that teaches, it's evidence-based. It started in Australia and now it's taught all over the globe. And it really teaches those foundational skills to recognize if something is going on, recognize signs and symptoms, and then the skills to be able to respond appropriately. And so if you're interested in taking a class like that, we have AgriLife Extension has instructors across the state. We also have partnerships with groups like local mental health authorities.
Mhm.
So we have a working relationship with Texas Panhandle Centers in Amarillo, and other local mental health authorities around the state. So if we can't get an instructor to a rural community or they can't, we can work together to try and provide those resources. So I would say to someone, reach out to your county extension agent. Can be either your family community health agent or your DAR, your disaster assessment and recovery agent, and say, hey, we need this training.
Mhm.
And we will find a way, because we want to make sure that our community members have the tools. And you and I both do this. We always try and liken this issue to a physical health condition.
Absolutely.
So people are very excited to take first aid in their community so that if someone needs CPR at their local restaurant, they only have one doctor in the community and that doctor's at the ER right now. Can we offer first aid level care until a medical professional can help that person? So in that same way, I think community members do want to have the skills to recognize something is going on, and then offer that support until someone who is a professional can come help.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Okay, Miquela, I wanted you to talk to us about before we take the training, and I hope everybody that's interested is looking and doing that. I think that'd be wonderful. Before we do that, what are a couple of things we need to be watching for now? Like I say, as our communities kind of go through the aftermath of this disaster.
Absolutely. We need to pay attention. We need to look for those kind of early signs and symptoms that we are maybe quickly think about: anger, grief, sadness. And in those early stages of someone experiencing this, we call them mental health challenges because it's not a mental illness. It's not something that's necessarily needs at this point a mental health professional, but a person is in mental and emotional distress. And so in that stage, we may say, check in. Hey, how are you doing? I noticed that you haven't been coming to church. I noticed that we're looking for changes, and we want to share with that person that we notice these changes and we're concerned, because people just want to know that someone cares. And again, going back to that, like, oh, I don't want to bother them. Most of the time, you're not bothering someone by checking in on them and just saying, hey, I was thinking about you.
Mhm.
So looking for changes in behavior, looking for changes in the way someone looks. Maybe they're usually very well put together and lately they look very unkempt. So just looking for those small changes and checking in. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly, and if you haven't gone through mental health first aid, you may not know exactly what to do. So what you can say is honest. You can say, I'm not sure how to help, but I want you to know that I care about you and I'm here for you. And if at any point you feel like you need some sort of support, I'm gonna help you. I want to help you navigate that or help walk with you through that. Then we want people to be able to recognize worsening signs and symptoms. Hey, this is going on for an extended period of time. And again, a lot of times people just need a listening ear, someone who's not going to judge them, someone who they know cares, who's going to check in. And if we notice things like, again, the appearance is disheveled, or these things like those changes, like not showing up or doing things that they used to like, or they're having sleep disruptions, those are things we notice. Hey, you mentioned to me last month that you were feeling really upset about what happened, and you mentioned to me this week that you're still having trouble sleeping. Is this something that you would consider talking to someone about? Is there some way that I can support you?
Yeah.
So again, just showing up. And you don't always have to know the perfect thing to say, but showing up matters. And then those warning signs of suicide, if something progresses into something even more serious, into a crisis situation, things like talking about feeling like there's no way out, feeling like talking about dying, talking about feeling like there is no solution to this situation beyond that.
Yeah. Or people
Saying,
would be better off without me here, right? Like they'd be better off
yes,
if I wasn't here. Yeah.
yes, those are warning signs of suicide. And sometimes people have this misconception. It is a myth that people talking about suicide is simply like a cry for attention. It could be a cry for help. And so we don't ever want to dismiss someone talking about kind of what you're saying. Things would be my family, this would all be better off without me. That is a warning sign that we want to take seriously. And sometimes we have to ask the hard question, are you having thoughts of suicide? And we have to be prepared for the hard answer, which is maybe that they are.
Yeah.
And anytime someone expresses that they are having thoughts of suicide, we want to do what we can to de-escalate the crisis and get them connected to professional help as soon as we can.
Okay. Got it. Miquela, one last thing I want to encourage folks is that there are resources available, there are hotlines available. And so in my cell phone, I have, right, the 988, which is the crisis number, nationwide crisis hotline number. You go, they always answer the phone 24 hours a day. If you're in crisis, if you are trying to help someone who's in crisis, that's a phone number you want to have access to immediately.
Absolutely. I save it in my phone. And to your point, it doesn't have to be because I'm in crisis. It could be I see something is going on with someone and I don't know what to do. So you can call that as a resource. Someone is always going to answer. I trust 988 because it's been around. They have their model has been tested. And I know that when I tell someone to call 988, that they're always going to answer. And I just have that number in your phone and you can call or text. And there are other resources, of course, that you can find online. AgriLife has resources. And there's a lot of, but that crisis number is most important.
Yeah. One last thing I'll say too, I think a lot of times, I mean, as you know well, being in an ag family yourself, mine as well, we're not great about talking about feelings or how our emotions or anything. This is not our area a lot of times. I would just encourage you, there are counselors out there, there are doctors out there is help out there that does understand agriculture. And so it may not be the first person that you get, but they're out there and we can help you find those. And so if that's something that concerns you, they're not going to understand me, they're not going to understand this way of life. I totally get that concern. Those resources are available. We can help you find those as well.
Thanks for bringing that up, because that is a barrier to seeking care. They don't understand me. They don't understand this background that we come from, because people are afraid it's a caller from Austin who just doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And so, or a provider from Austin who just doesn't get it. And so we like in mental health first aid to use this analogy that maybe you've gotten a bad haircut before, but you didn't stop getting haircuts after that. You found a new hairdresser. And so in that same way, you may encounter a clinician that is not the right fit for you. But that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be someone that is the right fit for you.
Right. Okay. Well, then in conclusion, the last thing I want to say, Miquela, and I want your thoughts on this. I think it's important to leave people with the idea that there's always hope. Like, this tragedy was terrible. The things that we've seen and the stories that we've heard are horrific. But there's always hope. And if you're not okay, that's okay. And it's okay to need help, right? If you had a broken arm or you were having a heart attack, nobody would think, well, I don't want to go get help for that. I need to be tough. That no one would think that. So I just want to encourage people, it's okay to need help in this area and to know that that help is available.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think that mental health and mental health conditions are often viewed as like very black and white, like either I am well or I am unwell, which means I have a mental illness. And so if we can think about it as more existing more on a continuum, I am well, meaning that I have coping strategies because we can't avoid bad things happening in life. Things happen in general, but I have coping strategies to help me be resilient. That's where we would consider or kind of like the well end. And then all the way on the other end is where you might have a diagnosable mental health or condition or mental illness. But there's a lot in between where it's, hey, you don't have a mental illness, but you have suffered an injury of some sort, and we need to seek care and rehabilitate that in the same way that we would a broken ankle. If I break an ankle, I'm not going to say, oh, I now have a foot or leg that doesn't work. I would seek care so that I can recover. I can get a cast, I can get x-rays, I can get the medical attention that I need so that it doesn't become a long-term ankle issue, so that I can heal. And then I'm back to being, a fully functioning athlete or whatever it is. So we want to intervene early because it doesn't have to become something more serious. So avoiding it, I think people just want to avoid things. And that's not how we would treat a physical health condition. We would not say, I'm going to wait until I have a cardiac event before I start taking high blood pressure medication. If your doctor says you have high blood pressure, you're going to do something about it, I hope, through behavioral interventions or through medications before it turns into something more serious. And so it is not a bad thing to seek care for something early because you are going to have a better long-term outcome than if you avoid, ignore, and then wait for it to turn into something more serious.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Miquela, thank you so much for doing this today. Thank you for all the work that you're doing in this area. You really are a leader in the agency on this topic, and we appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and thank you for shedding light on this topic.